Bonjour, my farmtastic friends. Farmer Phil here. And it's a big debate between Stephanie and I. What do we use in the garden? Are we using chemical fertilizers? Are we using compost? A mix of both? The big dilemma. What we do here at the farm is a mix of conventional agriculture and organic. We do a integrated pest management. We do use chemical fertilizers and pesticides here only as a last resort. We do use pesticides that are approved for organic production. We'll do the sulfur, the copper, and the dormant oil. But there's one theory that we've stolen from organic agriculture that I really appreciate, and that is the idea that we're all part of one big ecosystem. And the more we know about that ecosystem, the better we can produce food and control our pests. That is one thing I truly appreciate about organic agriculture. So without further ado, we're going to cover exactly that. Organic agriculture, what is it all about? Enjoy!
Welcome to the Farm to Food podcast. I'm Hugh Maynard, publisher of the Gleaner newspaper, the team that brings you this podcast every 2 weeks. The Farm to Food podcast is presented to you by Desjardins and supported by the Livestock Breeders Association and Quinn Farm. The theme of this episode is organic farming, a fringe movement beginning in the 1960s and 70s. Most supermarkets today have sections and shelves specifically for organic products and represents nearly $10 billion in sales across Canada. Organic food is that which is produced using farming systems that do not use synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, reduce negative effects on the environment while maintaining soil fertility and supporting animal welfare. Organic food products cannot contain, for example, artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives, nor if the farming process has used genetic engineering as well as growth hormones or routine use of antibiotics. In this episode, we speak to several organic farmers about their experiences, as well as some consumers on how they view organic produce. To get us started today, the Gleaner's news editor, Sarah Rennie, joins us now to discuss organic farming, something she knows quite a bit about because she is an organic farmer. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello.
So when did you start farming organically? Not in the 60s, I know that. And how was the certification process?
So we were certified organic right from the get-go. We took a plot of land that was nice and located behind our house, and we worked on it. We drained some land and we became certified right away. Started our farm 12 years ago, and we've been going from there. We rent some land now. We've expanded. We've got 4 greenhouses, it's been an incredible up and down run, I have to say, because we started our family in the same year, and so we had a lot of learning to do very quickly.
Right, and I'm quite sure that everything we're going to talk about in this episode, from the weather to marketing to issues with bugs and all that kind of stuff that are more difficult to deal with on an organic basis, are all things that you've had to deal with through the course of your farming history.
Yep, and me and my partner, we were both rookies when we started. Neither of us grew up really in farming. My husband was born and raised in Toronto, and I grew up here sort of adjacent to farming. My one side of my family is in dairy transport and the other side was in, a dairy farm. But really not attached to any kind of particular farming. We just always had gardens. And so, it's the learning curve is gigantic when you get into it and you start realizing everything that a conventional farmer does, an organic farmer also does: fertilizing, pesticide use, dealing with bugs, dealing with weeds. Weeds are, weeds are the worst.
Right. It's always backbreaking to get into that type of work on a market garden farm. So let's get started. I spoke with a neighbour, Steve Lalonde, who purchased his family's home farm in Ormstown, Quebec in 1984. Along with his wife, Lorraine, they decided to begin the transition to organic, and their first fields were certified organic in 2000. Today, Tullagorum Farm has 220 acres under certification, growing grain corn, soybeans, wheat, alfalfa, and 2 varieties of popcorn. He told me that farmers who want to go organic have to deal with a delay in getting certified.
Well, the certification is your crop can be certified from 36 months from the last use of a prohibited substance. So if your timing is right and say your last herbicide use was in June, well, in your 3rd year of production come September, your crops would be eligible to be certified. So it's essentially a 2 to 3 year, depending on your management and what your usage was of a prohibited substance, it can be 2 to 3 years harvest cycle before you get certified. Then there is an annual inspection and record keeping on our part as well for field operations and selling, who we sold to, how much, when things were moved, what silos were filled, when did we inspect the vehicles that were hauling our grain away to make sure they were clean, paying attention to the little details that they have to keep on top of. We were fortunate that we had a commercial chicken operation that was conventional, not organic. And we are in the organic industry. You are allowed to use conventional manure on your crops. You have to respect a withdrawal period from the time of application to harvest. We use a lot of intercropping. That is, in the cereals, we will typically plant a legume, which would be clover, hairy vetch, something along those lines.
I also asked Steve about how they manage weeds without being able to use a herbicide.
Timing is of the utmost importance for weed control. If we were to put our crop in the ground too early when the ground is cold and it takes a week or 2 for the crop to emerge, we've given the weeds a week or 2 to get established. And speaking from past experience, that is a major headache in grain corn. Corn is slow to grow, slow to cover the ground, and that's where we run into trouble. I would say corn is probably our most problematic crop in our weed control management rotation. Soybeans, in my opinion, are the simplest, and the winter cereals, as long as they get established and get a good head start in the spring, they will outcompete the weeds. And the winter cereals will also help break up the weed cycle, since we'll be harvesting earlier than what the weeds are mature at. We'll be harvesting the cereals earlier than what the weeds are mature at. We will be able to cut them before they go to seed and help break their cycle. So timing is a big factor, weather conditions as well. If we get the right weather, we'll have exceptional corn. If we get weather that doesn't cooperate with us, like we've had the last couple of years, we have more weeds in the corn than we would like. Soybeans, on the other hand, in my experience, very easy. They come out of the ground fast. They cover fast. You can weed. They're much more flexible when you're cultivating than the corn is.
So one of the other things that organic farmers have to deal with is the fact that because they can't use some of the conventional materials in producing their crops, they lose a little bit of the cost advantage because they have to substitute with other processes such as mechanical weeding, and so it affects the economics. So Sarah, let's delve into that part about the money that is being made, the economics of organic farming versus traditional farming.
I think, what you said is exactly true. Certainly on an organic vegetable farm, you're hand weeding a lot of the times, or you're weeding with, like you said, very rudimentary tools in a lot of ways. Most of us have tractors at this point, but you're still looking at a lot of just heavy labor that goes into organic farming, a little bit less possibly in the grain industry. But as Steve, I'm sure, will let you know, the work level is still there, and he must be dealing with a crazy grain market as well.
Well, he dives into that. I talked to him about the economics of organic farming from a cash crop, as we say, a field crops where you grow grains like corn and wheat and oats. And he gives us some insights about profits that can be involved in organic farming.
Over the years, the organic industry has taken off and flourished. For quite a number of years, we were seeing growth rates of 20%. And which is, in the grain market, that's exceptional in my opinion. The markets have fluctuated quite a bit. They've settled in at a very reasonable price. Our organic soybeans that we grew last year, we were able to market for, I believe, was $1,125 a ton. And our yields, in the soybeans, our yields don't suffer. We'll run with the herd on yields in soybeans. Where our farm struggles is the grain corn. Because of the limited amount of manure we're able to apply, and especially in the last couple of years, when we've had dry summers, our cover crops have not been what they should have been, so we were lacking a little bit of fertility for the corn. Corn right now, I just heard from a neighbor who talked to his friend who sold some organic corn at $650 a ton, which is that's very good.
One of Steve's very successful crops is popcorn. He grows 2 varieties, and he swears it tastes better than the packaged stuff you find in the stores. Have you ever grown popcorn, Sarah?
No, we've never tried to grow popcorn on our farm. We tried to grow sweet corn, and it was horrible failure. Really, the raccoons found it very easily and quickly, and they ate all of it. I don't even think we got one ear. But I'm entirely certain that I have eaten more of his popcorn than is healthy in my lifetime. Their popcorn is the whitest, it's incredibly bright. It's called white lightning, some of it, and it's just crunchier. It's more delicious. It's hard to explain, but it is the best popcorn, I think, in the world.
Yeah, and he also produces what they call a dark variety. It's called Midnight Blue. And I have to tell you, there's nothing better than chomping on some of Steve and Lorraine's popcorn while you go Habs go, right? It's a great hockey game snack. So anyway, I asked Steve what his advice would be for farmers who would like to try their hand at going organic.
The big thing is pay attention, look around, do some experiments at home first. Well, that's what we did. We'd turn the fertilizer off on a few rows of corn and just have the manure there to feed the crop and see what the difference was. And if you can't tell the difference and you don't see a difference, then you can see where it's viable and you can expand on that research. And then you experiment with your weed control, talk to somebody, what equipment do they have, what would they not buy again, what would they really get sooner than what they purchase something sooner than they did. What are the tools that are really going to help you?
So cash crop is one area for organic production, field crops, as we say, and we've had a good run through with Steve Lalonde on that type of production. Now we're going to take a look at organic vegetables, because these are the products that probably most consumers are familiar with, because there are sections in the supermarket. There are farmers markets, which the organic producers use a lot to sell, as well as the community supported agriculture, the baskets that people buy. A lot of that is focused on organic production. So Sarah, tell us a little bit about producing organic vegetables.
And one of the things I really liked or appreciated about what Steve was saying was when he was talking about just experimenting. And certainly when you're starting out as an organic farmer, that's what you're doing. You're just experimenting, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. You have to figure out what kind of soil you have. You need to figure out what kind of bugs you have very quickly. You need to figure out just how you work with all of those different things too, because it's a very different way of working to be growing something organically. And one of the most interesting things that I think we found as relatively young farmers getting into agriculture was the Réseau des Familles de Famille or the Family Farmers Network. And so we joined this network of family farmers, which spans across Quebec, that's now 30 years old. It's one of the most successful models for a producer-focused movement, really, for getting vegetables to market in a sustainable way. And we joined largely because we had sort of a shared idea of what we wanted to be doing with our farm. We wanted to be reaching directly to clients. We didn't really want to be going through large grocery chains, that sort of thing. We wanted a very personal approach to how we were going to be selling our vegetables. And that's what the RFF sort of markets, and it's what it's created and what it has sustained across Quebec now for 3 decades. And so I spoke to Fred Thériault, who's actually a board member with the RFF. He's also a farmer with the Coop Tournesol in Les Cèdres. And we chatted a little bit about the early history of the network, its development. So here he is, and I'll let him explain that a little bit more.
So, the Réseau des fermiers et farmers de famille started some 30 years ago, and it was a citizen project. Some women who had heard about things like that being done in Japan. The initial idea was in Japan, where a community kind of hired a farmer to start growing food for them, because they wanted safe food. They want to have a direct link with their food. And then that inspiration from Japan got talked over in the US, and it's Elizabeth Hunter and Laure Varidel were part of the folks who were starting Équiterre at the time, and they were really interested in food issues and food sovereignty issues, and they heard about this idea and thought, let's try to start a project like that in Quebec. So they started the first pilot project with La Ferme Cadet Roussel, which was a farm where they did endives, and they were run by a French couple, and were struggling in many ways. And when they heard about this idea of getting paid ahead of time to secure a diverse harvest for a group of people, a community downtown that wanted to get good food, and they were a biodynamic farm, they were very excited and decided to launch into it and try this concept. And the pilot project went really well the first year, and so quickly then the project grew. And I think the second year, or the first official year of the network, it was 5 farms that participated, and then it became 12, and it grew exponentially after that. We joined in 2005 at Tournesol Farm, because that's when we started our farm, and we've seen the network grow a lot in those years. And post-pandemic, it's been it was very high times. Lots of new farms were created, and people had no trouble selling their food because everybody was afraid and wanted to get good local food. And so that was maybe the highest numbers we've had in the network were right after the pandemic. I think we were maybe 180 farms total in the network, including our associate farms then. And then things slowed down since. I believe now we're about 130 farms in the network, which is still very significant. And we're one of the biggest networks. We are the biggest network of such in the world. And when we participate in some international meetings, because there are meetings for folks who coordinate CSA networks, people's jaws drop to see what we are able to do in the Family Farmer Network.
So that's interesting about the network. So what are the advantages for someone like you as an organic vegetable producer? What do they provide? How do they help support the work that you're doing?
One of the main things that they do is they supply support. Because, for all farmers, farming is a little bit isolating. So there's a huge network of supportive farmers that you're able to access through the RFF. The other thing that it does is it provides an incredible platform that we're able to use to reach people. So it's kind of like a built-in marketing system that we sort of subscribe to or buy into. The way it works is that every single one of the baskets, or the vegetable baskets that people buy from us, a certain percentage of that goes directly to the RFF so that it becomes a sustainable organization. And then from there, they return that investment to the farmers in different ways. But it's a very positive organization. And like I said, it's been around for so many years now that it runs very, very smoothly. You know, at the start of the season every year, we know that we can sort of look to the RFF and that there will be a lot of support there for us as far as just helping to find new subscribers for baskets, but also making sure that our older subscribers come back. And yeah, it's a really good sustainable model as well. The other thing that's really interesting is that it really runs on this idea of community-supported agriculture. All of the farms in the RFF are certified organic. They have to be in order to join. But most of them are working with some sort of CSA model. So I'm going to let Fred explain a little bit more about what CSA is and how it works on the farm.
A lot of the CSA farms now work in a concept that's a bit more commercial and standard, where people sell a share of their harvest ahead of time, and folks pay ahead of time and accept that there's going to be some variations. You don't exactly know how the weather's going to be and what the insect pressures are, but you know that you're going to get really fresh, a really good deal on really fresh food, and a strong connection with your family farmer. And so people buy into this, pay in advance, and the farmers sell number of shares they need to sell, and then they go on with their season and start planning the products, and then they bring the products to the people throughout the whole season. In Quebec, our seasons tend to start at the end of May or sometime in June and last until October, November. Some folks have CSAs that run through the whole year, but generally it's a more of a seasonal thing. Or the winter arrangement is different. People do deliveries every second week or once a month. Or everybody's got their own kind of model. So every farm is different and has their own kind of take on CSA. But the concept is that the harvest is sold ahead of time, paid ahead of time, which gives the funds to the farmers to buy all the inputs, start their season, start to pay their employees, and then the harvest is delivered fresh, high quality, organic to the customer base. And it's a partnership that really benefits both sides.
Mm-hmm. And I think the important thing to note here too is that what does unite all of these farms, they might have a different model. Some people, are doing fixed baskets. Other people have sort of a market strategy where people can come and take what they want. But every farm associated with the network is certified organic.
Yes, that's very important for us. We want to be able to protect the consumer, and certification is the only way to really do that. Anybody can claim that they're ecological, but organic is a protected term. And so in order to market our organic basket, we need everybody in the network to be certified. And then when a young farm or a new farm is in process of being certified, we'll accept them, and they can also be on our map. There's a special section for that, but organic certification is the best way to really distinguish who's really working organically, and to really clarify our communication. That's why we choose organic certification in our network.
So, Sarah, speaking of CSA, we have one of the first organic CSA farms in the province located in our area.
Yeah, so Jamie and Nora Quinn of the Ferme La Terre Bleue, which is in Elgin, which is just down the road from us, and it's actually where we rent some land. They are brilliant pioneers, really, in the development of organic vegetable production in Quebec and the CSA movement. We have a little bit of something in common, too, in the sense that they came to farming from different backgrounds, kind of in a very idealistic way as well, very similar to the way we did. And so I'm going to let Jamie explain a little bit of their history, how they landed in Elgin and where they went from there.
We came from downtown Toronto with two children in 1984. We moved to a little farm on Ranch-Cat, 50 acres on very wet, rocky land, and we started farming. Idealistically, much kind of like your story. We didn't know much about farming. were drawn to it for lots of different reasons. Drawn to the area because land was reasonably priced, which it wasn't in Ontario then. And Nora's family was here. We wanted to be close to our family. So we had lots of good reasons to come here. And 3 years after we moved to Ormstown, we decided that the road was too busy and the land was pretty challenging. So we exchanged wet, sandy, rocky land for wet clay land. So we got lucky to find this property in Elgin, and through word of mouth, we managed to buy. It was just vacant land at the time. There was no house here, no electricity, no well. But we were young and we were enthusiastic, and Elgin seemed like a great place. So we jumped ship. We moved in 1987 over here. But we, in terms of our farming career, we were market gardening right from the beginning, and so then we just transferred. We worked very hard on draining this land and bringing it into production, and went from 1984 to 1994 at Atwater Market, and that's where we cut our teeth. That's where we learned to do what we were doing. Went to conferences, read lots of books, and by the end of the 10 years, it was quite a frenzy at Atwater Market. We had a successful little business, and way too successful. We couldn't handle the volume, and we asked our members. We'd heard about CSA, which is so community supported agriculture. The word was around, and we thought we would be a great little thing for our farm because we had a lot of loyal customers at that point at Atwater Market. We just asked them, we just did a little survey, would you rather than compete for vegetables in this big market when we didn't really have enough to go around, would you like to try something like this? And almost everybody said yes. So we found a little location in NDG and started one of the early CSAs in Quebec. And it was successful right away. We always had a waiting list. I compare it to like a small restaurant where you have 30 or 40 tables or whatever number of tables you have. And once the word gets out, we're just always full. And so that's what we were. The word was out that we had nice vegetables, and then we were reasonably priced, and we were enthusiastic and all the good stuff that you need to be. And so we were busy. We were oversubscribed right from the beginning, and always once the word was out, our entire career we were oversubscribed. So we did that for the rest of our farming career.
Yeah, I guess Jamie, in the early days, I didn't go to the drop-off except maybe once or twice a summer because we had small kids at home. But Jamie was always there. People really like meeting the farmer. And it also, as the kids got older, I was able to go more until I was going every drop-off. And it was a lively spot. People were talking about ways they used the vegetables. People really liked talking to us about what was going on the farm. And it was very rewarding for us to have that kind of contact. And some people were with us for years. We watched their kids grow up, which was that was wonderful too. And sometimes their kids would then become members. People would drop in off the street just to see what was going on because it looked pretty fun. So that was, I think that was one of the things that helped us keep at what was pretty hard work.
Yeah, I think of that support side, community supported. We often talk about the farmer and the city, the split. It's just amazing how these people came out to our farms and helped us. There was we had so much in common with them. Whether they were teachers or we had doctors, we had lawyers, we had people on welfare, we had all kinds of people in our members. And it was a little community. Our farm was the center of an aspect of a community. It wasn't a complete community, but it was a kind of a focal point.
So Jamie and Nora were known to pull up to Atwater Market with a station wagon full of veggies and just kind of pop the trunk. They laugh about their first stalls at the Atwater Market where people would literally sidestep around these mountains of bok choys and kale and the things that they were actually able to grow easily in Elgin. One of their first clients was actually evidently somebody who really loved bok choy, also became their first CSA member, and she stayed with them until they retired just a few years ago. And they've got lots of incredible stories about their CSA members. They really build a community. They still talk so fondly about them. They were telling me that during the ice storm in '98, when the Chateauguay Valley was particularly hard hit, 2 of their members invited them to stay in Montreal with them just because electricity was out for so long. Another time, for their wedding anniversary, their members chipped in and sent them on a 2-week vacation to Paris, which, our members have not offered to do that for us yet. But it's just amazing to see the same people every week. They talked about this as well, just how affirming it is. It really helps you to go back do the hard work that's involved in farming. We're only 12 years in, but we have already watched, some of the families at our CSA grow with ours, and we really take a lot of love back from our drop spots.
Yes, I can. Your mention of the ice storm going back to 1998 in our area, particularly along the U.S. border with New York. Some of those communities were out for over a month, so it must have been a real challenge. So the name La Terre Bleue, it's a very interesting name for a farm. So what's the story there?
Yeah, so much like us, when Jamie and Nora started to first dig into their land, they discovered a field full of literal blue clay. And as anybody in agriculture will tell you, blue clay is not where you want to start your farm. So they had to do an incredible amount of work just to, bring their land up to what it is now. But as somebody who gets to farm in their soil, what they've done is incredible. They have just luscious fields that we get the honor of working in. One of the interesting things is that Jamie became known for some of his techniques for working in clay because it is so difficult, and it's known around the world for being difficult. So I'll let him explain a little bit of some of the ways that he found to work around clay. Here's Jamie again.
I read a book on managing clay, and it was written by an agricultural extension kind of service in England called University Could Have Applied Lots of Farming Agronomy. And anyways, it was exactly that, how to manage British clay, English clay. And that's where the idea of permanent wheelings came from. And I was kind of a pioneer in applying it that I know of. That's what often we're cited in books, is because of our permanent wheelings. So that means the tractor always goes to the same place in your field year after year after year. And it takes a little bit of fooling around to have any idea where those wheelings are and to get all your equipment at the same width so that you can manage that you don't. It wasn't, given that we were working with beds, it was easier than it would be for a field crop to do that. So by using those permanent wheelings and using lots and lots of compost, some of the local dairy farms are very generous with manure, and we composted the manure and put on tons and tons of manure. The garden just became very easy to work, very the soil transformed in texture. And I still know where the wheelings are in most of the garden. They're kind of identifiable in it, but I'm not working the fields anymore, so it doesn't really matter. But that was an integral part of working the clay, was staying off the soil when it's wet, not driving on it and stuff like that. I mean, Denis LaFrance and different people like that took a real interest in the fact that we were setting up our system where our cultivator, our planter, our seeder, or whatever we were using always stayed on the same wheelings.
And land, it's not considered.
Yeah, the land. And the only way to go in and out of clay land when it's wet is not to make a mess of it, is to stay off the garden. It's not the easy way to get land that's not appropriate for. I mean, land that is appropriate, like silty, sandy loam or black muck, it sure makes life a lot easier if you're going to do market gardening on it. I don't recommend going and finding a piece of clay, but it is kind of gratifying that you can do anything if you try hard enough at it. We did it because this land was beautiful and the community we wanted to be in, and it wasn't expensive, and that was important because we didn't have any money. So put it all together, we ended up on blue clay in Elgin.
Yeah, that's a challenge that young farmers face now. As you know, it's the price of land. It makes it very difficult to get into the sort of thing that we're doing, or if any farming, I guess. We were lucky that way.
And watching the unfolding of farming since we've been here, it's just the agriculture has gotten more concentrated. And that's kind of concerning to watch the scale of which it's happened, that it's unfolded over the last decades. And with, in and of itself, it could be a neutral thing, but it just tends to include the destruction of habitat, the deforestation, and taking down of windrows and hedgerows and all habitat. And it's like we're living like, it makes no difference, and that's it's disconcerting to watch that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to say that having worked pretty close to nature around us for so many years, you become very aware of birds and insects, and we can see the effect. We notice the decline of, for instance, butterflies, and it's just and that was one of the things that I liked about the work that we did, was being out where you can, you're aware of all, not just the bird life, but the insects around you, which are fascinating. I mean, we're not taking care of those things the way that we should. And it's necessary that we take care of them.
So after retiring, do they see a hopeful future for small-scale organic farming and agriculture in general? And I just note to add on there that recent statistics show that the number of farms total continues to decline. There's actually an increase in small farms, which I imagine many of them are starting out as organic. So it seems to be encouraging. What do they see for the future?
Well, certainly there's a big movement to start out smaller organic farms, and it's much easier to start a small organic farm because you don't actually need that much land. We started out as a micro farm on, about an acre of land. And there's been a lot of research, a lot of books written, those sorts of things from, Quebec farmers, actually, largely on, earning a fairly decent salary from, gardening intensively on small plots of land. So it's an affordable way to get into farming. I say affordable with, very heavy hesitation. But it certainly, it is a way of getting into farming that's a lot more accessible to young people, especially when they're coming out of school, those sorts of things, because you don't have to make those major investments in huge amounts of land or quota or anything else that you're doing on some of the other kinds of farms. They are very hopeful. They see a lot of what's happening in our area. They actually see a lot of what the farmers, conventional farmers, are doing as very hopeful. So I'll let them explain a little bit about what they see for the future of farming.
Some of the places I see hopeful changes, and it's not, I think it's great that there's so many young farmers out there, and they always tickle me, and I get great energy from watching them. So sometimes I feel tired when I watch them, but I think it's great. Some of the bigger movements that I'm seeing, and sometimes it isn't even organic, like probably 10 years ago, I started seeing the local dairy farmers using pretty intensive cropping systems where they're putting, I guess it's a fall rye on after they harvest to take the fields through the winter so that you don't have erosion, and also giving up the plow for shallow cultivation, and so you don't put nearly as much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. These kinds of massive movements of technique of agriculture, and sometimes they're ahead of organic farmers in how they're implementing it, how efficiently they're implementing these techniques. And these ideas are coming through research and applied best practices. And obviously we need agriculture. We can't live without it, but on the other hand, it needs to be done with best possible practices. And some of the bigger movements coming out of MAPAC, getting away from herbicides, I find those all encouraging. And when I see them in action, sometimes when you see them in action, they're on very large scales. There are thousands of acres suddenly they're not plowing there, and suddenly they're using cover crops, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, the change comes slowly, it seems, but I think there's hope that things are changing, will change. Sometimes you can feel like you're hitting your head against a brick wall, but I think there really is, that there are good things that are happening and will happen, and it does take a kind of commitment. I think you have to do it. It's better if you don't get into it for the money, because that's going to be the hard part, but if you really can see that it's important.
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to be a farmer when I was growing up. It's the last thing I probably thought of, but once I got into it, I felt lucky to be doing it. I felt sometimes it was hard, but most of the time it was very meaningful. It's been a really great choice of a way to live.
So we've talked about field crops, we've talked about organic vegetables, we've talked about community-supported agriculture, CSA as we refer to it, but nothing is ever static, so things are changing. And after, let's just round the number off at 50 years, what are some of the evolutions, what are some of the changes that are going on with regards to organic production?
On the production side, there's a lot that's changing, but it's still pretty basic as far as organics are concerned, and it's the certification practice and the certification guidelines that kind of maintain it that way. Farmers are doing what they can. Certainly, they're incorporating new and different kinds of mechanics onto the farm. We spoke in the last podcast with Reed Alloway, who was bringing and electrifying as much as he possibly can on his farm, which is the same farm that Fred Thériault works on, who we spoke with earlier in this podcast. So there are a lot of changes, a lot of things that are developing. But again, the certification practice ensures that the rules are followed, and they're quite straightforward. There's still a lot of misconceptions, but most of those misconceptions come from the fact that people continuously think of organic as meaning that we're not using pesticides, we're not using fertilizers, that this is sort of an all-natural kind of farming, which it is. but we need to be able to use the same practices in order to actually produce crops. So I spoke with Jess Elwell from the Coop des Jardins de la Résistance in Ormstown about being certified and some of these misconceptions. We tackled pesticides first, so here she is explaining why pesticides are important.
We do use pesticides in organic farming. I think it would be quite impossible to not use pesticides. I mean, we definitely try, like bug-wise, we definitely try to put physical barriers in between the bugs and our plants. Like we put like netting on top of some vegetables. But, you know, it gets to a point where sometimes you have to spray for things because otherwise you have no crop. And like all the pesticides we use, like the advantage of them is that they degrade very fast into something not lethal. Like usually, I think it's less than 12 hours usually. So a pesticide that we use quite often is Bacillus thuringiensis. It is basically a little bacteria, and when caterpillars eat it, their guts like explode, which is a way to get rid of cabbage moth. Because if you have cabbage moths and people have this, you know, they buy this cabbage but it's all eaten up, or like there's a giant caterpillar in the middle. So it's better. But within like 12 hours, 6 hours, it stays on the plant. The caterpillars have a chance to eat it, but then, you know, with a bit of sunlight and rain, then it washes off the plants and it's completely harmless in the environment. So it's not like killing, you know, like monarch butterfly caterpillars and things like that. And obviously we also try to respect the same restraints that big farms have, where we try not to spray where it's super windy outside or when we're going to have a huge rain, because we don't want it like, you know, washing into wherever right away. We also use something that's very exciting that we've been using the last 5-6 years are predatory insects. So we use one kind of insect to control another kind of insect. We use them mostly in the greenhouses because it's a closed system. So like, for instance, if we have an aphid problem in one of the greenhouses, we introduce this like cute little parasitic wasp that like lays its eggs in the aphids, and then the aphids become mummified, and then more wasps are born from the aphid. It's like some seriously alien stuff, but it works great actually, and they're not wasps that sting or anything. So and they're native to here. Also really cool.
So aside from use and practices, there's also issues around labeling and misinformation about, as you earlier said, what is organic and what does it mean, and who's allowed to use that labeling? There
definitely is, and a lot of it sort of comes from farms that are sort of misappropriating the term organic. You hear a lot about organically grown vegetables, for example, which doesn't actually mean very much because it's not certified. There's also things like naturally grown, sustainably grown. You know, we could rattle off a whole list of these sort of labels. But as Jess explains, it's actually very frustrating for a lot of the farmers who are working and who are paying, in fact, to be certified as organic farmers. So I asked her how she felt about it, and her answers was a little emotional. So here we go.
It makes, it kind of boils my beans, you know. It makes me pretty upset because that's marketing. It's like a misleading label because there's no certification for ecologically or naturally or sustainably grown. Like, it's a marketing tool. It's a greenwashing tool. And maybe that farm is ecological, but like, what does that even mean? Like, what's their definition of ecological, right? So pretty vague. Whereas if you have the EcoSire or like what's the other one? If you have a certification, it's like guaranteed by a third party that it is indeed organic. It's not a form of greenwashing. It's like we're just putting our cards on the table, you know, and being like, here, we're organic, and that's it, you know. Yeah, no, it really boils my blood.
And there are a lot of farms now that argue as well that it's just too expensive, and that's sort of where they draw the line then, is that they're doing everything that organic farmers are doing. It's just that they're not paying for certification.
Mm-hmm. And like, I'm sure some of them are, you know. It's like, it also depends on the scale too. Like, if there's like if there's a guy farming an acre, you know, selling greens to a restaurant, you know, you can go and look around and talk to him or whatever, or the restaurant owner can. But if it's like, if they're doing like us, we do baskets for 400 people a week in the summer, and so obviously they're not all going to come and look at our stuff. So I think it depends on the scale too, but And like I said, in an ideal world, it wouldn't be us paying for our certification. Like it's ridiculous that we have to pay to be organic.
So it is complicated. There's conventional, there's low input, there's integrated pest management, there's regenerative agriculture, there's organic agriculture, there's biodynamics, there's a lot of classifications. So how do people navigate these labels?
It's complicated, and I guess it depends on what a lot of people are looking for. There's also, newer sort of labeling that talks about just local, and the importance of local goods versus organic goods versus, biodynamic products, which are really interesting. We've used some principles of biodynamics in our farming as well, which sort of guides you as far as when to plant certain things based on phases. It's very interesting. We use a calendar. And if you stick to it, sometimes you get results, sometimes you don't. But a lot of people swear by those sorts of practices. There's no certification, however, for biodynamics. So really what it comes down to is knowing where your food is coming from, and whenever possible, knowing your farmer and buying your food sort of in its most basic state. Jess explains that having a closer connection to your farmer can also mean some pretty big savings down the line over grocery store prices. And it actually leads, more often than not, to less food waste. So I'll let her explain how that is. Here's Jess.
And it's funny because when baskets started, they were seen kind of as this luxury thing. It was only for the bourgeois and the middle class white people, but it's not the case anymore, especially since COVID. We've seen inflation explode, and our prices are actually really, really reasonable now, even cheaper than the grocery store a bunch of the time. And also you can verify that it's actually from our farm. It's not from the other side of the world where people are paid poorly or not at all to harvest tomatoes or whatever. And so having that connection with your farmer is important. And I don't it's not an exclusive club, it's not bourgeois, it's it's a good way to get your food and an amazing way to support your farmers. Just the fact that we as farmers can start a season with everything already sold is huge. We're all being we're farmers, we're planting things and weeding things and doing plumbing and doing electricity, and we're trying to be on Facebook and Instagram all the time. It's we wear so many different hats, whereas having things sold ahead of time is such a huge relief. And it just we can pay our employees, we can it's amazing. And when you get a basket, there's no waste. We want to sell this many baskets, we plan for that many baskets, and we plant for that many baskets, we harvest for that many baskets, and whatever little bit of leftover we have, we give to our employees, obviously, or we give to the pigs, or we give to the chickens, or we give to the La Bouffe Additionnelle in Huntington, and so I think that is a really important part of baskets that people maybe don't think about as much.
So a lot of what we've talked about, particularly in the last couple of interviews that we've had in this episode, are about engaging directly with consumers. So you're selling from farmers markets, you're selling through community-supported agriculture and other local means, which means that you have a good level of communication, you have a connection, because people do put a lot of trust in their farmers and the way that they produce and market food.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And that trust is very important. It's very important to the farmers. It's very important to the people who are buying, for example, who are buying our vegetable baskets, because they really do sign up at the beginning of the year, sometimes, as early as November or December the year before. And that's actually when we set our prices for the coming year. So when Jess was mentioning that, the inflation can change the prices and they can explode in grocery stores, more often than not, organic vegetable producers won't change their prices, especially if they have people who have signed up for their vegetable baskets. That's one of the perks, is that exactly how much your vegetables are going to cost for the entire season. And while you are investing in those a little bit ahead of time, that investment allows the farmers to know exactly how much they need to plant, exactly how much they need to harvest each week. And so that leads to less food waste, as Jess was saying. But more importantly, it also means that you're investing in your own food. You're investing in knowing where it's coming from, and you're making sure that it will be available as well. We saw a huge jump. Fred mentioned this. We saw a huge jump during COVID because all of a sudden there were concerns about whether or not people would be able to, to source the kinds of vegetables that they wanted in stores, because during COVID, airlines were down, those sorts of things. Transport was down. We weren't getting things into the grocery stores. And so people turned to local farmers, and the market really exploded for us. And it was wonderful. Once COVID sort of died down, that interest sort of died down as well. But there's a consistent market in Quebec, especially for people who are very interested in making sure that they know exactly where their food is coming from and that they can invest in it in a way that is actually, more sustainable.
Great. So thank you, Sarah, for guiding us through various elements of organic production, the economics and the marketing.
Yep. Well, they are important. The consumers, they're the eaters.
Switching from producers to consumers, our reporter Callan Forrester took some time to speak with shoppers on their weekly grocery run at 2 different grocery stores, each with a different price point. They were asked how organic products came into consideration when making their shopping lists. Over to Callan now to hear all about what consumers have to say.
The number one thing that I noticed when speaking with these shoppers about their weekly grocery shop was that whether or not they bought organic was heavily dependent on the price. Price seemed to be the number one thing that deterred people from buying organic because they perceived it as more expensive. Here's what a few of them had to say about why price is a factor to them. So I was wondering, when you do your grocery shopping weekly, does organic fruits and vegetables come into play, or organic products in general?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, and what is the biggest factor for you when you're deciding?
Quality.
Quality?
Yeah, if the regular stuff is not available, then we'll look at the organic.
Well, and is price a factor for you too?
No.
No, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
Honestly, right now I'm more like a student, so my main focus is usually price. So I used to buy organic, but then I started having support from my parents, so I only work for myself now. So now I'm just switching to the cheapest version that
for sure.
But as soon as I get more established, I'm pretty confident going back to organic as well.
And are you looking also at what's local versus not local, or is that less of a factor?
No, I actually don't pay attention to that side.
From time to time, it used to be a major factor. But with food prices the way they are now, I have to really look at cost versus or what is more healthy and nutritious. But before it was a priority, and now cost is a priority.
Something that I found interesting was that at higher end grocery stores, people said that they are expecting to pay more for organic food and are more willing to pay for organic food. And to them, it's not the fact that it's organic, it's more the quality that week and what looks best. That's what they're gravitating towards. I was just wondering, when you do your weekly shop, how often does organic versus non-organic come into play when you're making your decisions?
Not really important. I don't even know the difference.
You don't even know the difference? Okay.
If I see organic, I'll pick it up thinking that it's better.
Yeah, and does price come into play for you sometimes?
Yes, if it's organic, I will pay.
Yes, I would say it is one of a myriad of factors which I would like to focus on more.
Now, the point to me that was the most interesting was the idea of organic versus local. And when weighing the options between buying something local and organic, what's the best choice? And I'll put it over to our last clip now, and she can explain a little bit how she feels about that.
Yes, I would say it is one of a myriad of factors which I would like to focus on more if I could.
And what's the biggest factor that comes into play? Is it like quality, or is it price, or something else?
It's price, but also like I feel like the grocery store is fraught with decisions. So it's like packaging, and then also like seasonality. So all of those things. So I try to like have a little matrix of decision making as I go through things. So if it's like reasonably priced and it's like still in season, and I'm like, I'd rather buy something that's local and not organic than something that came from like California and is organic.
Thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Farm to Food podcast, presented to you by Desjardins. We will have lots more about farming and all things agri-food in the coming weeks, and we'd like to thank our partners for helping bring this initiative to life. The Livestock Breeders Association in Ormstown and Quinn Farm in Notre-Dame-de-Île-Perrot for promotional support.
This program is also made possible by the volunteer directors on the board of the Chateauguay Valley Community Information Services, non-profit social enterprise with charitable status. So please support these efforts by making a tax-deductible donation at farmtofood.ca.
The Farm to Food podcast has been made possible by the hard work and creative effort of the following people at The Gleaner: Hugh Maynard, publisher; Jackie Rourke, associate publisher; Sarah Rennie, news editor; Chantal Hortop, managing editor; Erica Taylor, copy editor; Stacey Pennington, audio production; Diana Chicky, sales and marketing; Jose Manal, office manager; Gail Elliott, administration; and myself, Callan Forrester, reporter.
And, of course, Farmer Phil. He'll be back in 2 weeks as part of our bi-weekly Farm to Food podcast with lots of interesting stories on the journey of food from the land to the kitchen table. Thanks for listening, and we appreciate your support for local journalism at farmtofood.ca.